Labour has sought to regain the initiative in the election campaign by pressing SNP ministers for full details of their investment talks with Chinese firms. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, insists she has nothing to hide. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
This is the bit where I can screw up, is that right?
The last thing Labour needs is another election screw-up. The chapati making in Leith went fine, which is more than can be said for the party's campaign so far. Labour's critics say their campaign's a mess. After last week, the party changed its tax policy, dropping plans to replace a £100 rebate with new help for lower earners. Then at the weekend, Kezia Dugdale backtracked after saying it wasn't inconceivable she'd support independence for Scotland if the UK left the EU. Today, Labour seems to have decided attack is the best form of defence. They're questioning why the First Minister quietly signed an understanding with Chinese businesses last month and only published details last night after photographs appeared in the Chinese media.
We're talking about £10 billion worth of potential investment in Scotland with the Chinese. We don't know what for, we don't know who was in the room, we don't know what the detail of that deal is.
The SNP MP George Kerevan criticises the UK Conservative government for making what he calls a pact with Chinese state capitalism in a newspaper column today. But in Glasgow, the Scottish Tories say the infrastructure investment SNP ministers are seeking from China also needs explanation.
We don't know from what the Scottish Government's now been forced to publish what China is getting out of this deal from Scotland. We don't know what Scotland's getting out of this deal, so it's very hard to judge whether it's a good or bad deal.
Jumping in with questions of his own from the borders, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats.
It's a bit suspicious for the SNP, who are always shouting about everything that they do. So I'm a bit suspicious. I want to find out more. That's why they need to come clean.
Raising a glass to a successful small enterprise in Shetland before posing with ponies. The SNP leader says Chinese whispers are distorting her business dealings with the world's second biggest economy.
This is an agreement to look at where there is potential for significant investment into Scotland. And, frankly, if my political opponents are saying that as First Minister I shouldn't encourage investment into Scotland, then all I think they're doing is demonstrating that they're not fit to be in the job.
But in an election, it's the job of all party leaders to fight for the biggest possible say in the next Scottish Parliament. Glenn Campbell reporting Scotland.
Scotland remains divided in attitudes to taxation. Well, that's according to a new poll for BBC Scotland. The survey suggests support for increasing the very top rate of tax. But there's also apparent backing for keeping Scottish tax rates in line with England. Here's our political editor, Brian Taylor.
This is the Edinburgh Beer Factory. A craft brewery with a dozen staff. They're small but ambitious.
Because we need to lager the beer for about 6 weeks.
Production only started last summer. To succeed, they need Scotland to prosper. So tax and spending really matter.
With Holyrood gaining new powers, the question of tax is predominant in this election. Should people in Scotland be prepared to pay more tax, perhaps to fund services such as education? Or should tax here be the same as it is in the rest of the UK? What about the standard rate? What about the upper rate? Big questions.
In our poll, respondents were asked to rate policies from 1 up to 10, producing an average score. First, the idea of increasing all rates of income tax by 1 penny in the pound. That's backed by Labour and the Liberal Democrats. In our poll, it rated 6.2. But it was slightly outpolled by the idea of keeping the Scottish rate of income tax the same as in England. That plan, backed by Conservatives, rated 6.5. Higher ranked still was Labour's idea of increasing the very top rate for those earning more than £150,000 from 45 pence to 50 pence. That rated 7.3, relatively popular. Among brewery staff, some are willing to pay more tax.
The fact that we prioritise free education and free healthcare, if that obviously comes at a cost, and if that's higher taxation, I think that's fine.
It's a penny. I don't think we'll feel it, and for the funds we could raise and the good that we could do, we should do it.
Some think it's simply wrong that people in Scotland should pay more.
I feel we all work very hard. It's a bit galling to think I could be working as hard and earning the same amount of money 60 miles down the road in Berwick.
Some fear the impact on low earners, even although both Labour and the Lib Dems say they'd protect those earning less than $20,000.
I just don't think that's a lot of money. So if, in a family or, single mom or someone that is in trouble, I think that might have an effect.
Critics say even if the starting rate for tax increases, people in Scotland would still end up paying more than in England. The Dems say a new zero-rate band could help. But how about that top-rate tax plan? Opinion was divided.
Personally, I don't buy into the idea that a higher rate of income tax for higher earners is going to scare off those within that bracket.
The top rate tax is sort of irrelevant because you don't raise any money, and there's about 17,000 people in the whole of Scotland who are eligible, so it won't solve any problem. So I would be putting tax up across the board.
The SNP would leave Scottish tax rates alone, but would reverse most of a scheduled tax cut for higher earners by altering the threshold for the upper 40p rate. Those details emerged after our survey questions were drafted. But we did ask about the general notion of keeping the higher tax threshold at the current 2016 rate, even if it's raised elsewhere. That rated 5.3, round about the midway point. The SNP say support for their brew is strengthening as people realise it's aimed at higher earners while protecting the low paid. Back to the staff. They generally wanted real delivery from public services if they had to pay more tax.
If there was a higher rate of income tax in Scotland, I'd want to see the benefit of that in terms of health, environment, education, really across the range of areas where they have actually control.
On council tax, our survey suggests folk favour higher charges for more expensive homes. Finally, welfare. More money for those who care for people with disabilities was rated 6.4. Higher still, there was 7.3 support for the idea of doubling the level of childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds. That's an SNP policy, although other parties also have childcare offers. Your election, your choice.